Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to the Film Channel. Rex Haas Thompson here, your humble instructor from Shasta College in film studies. Hope everybody are working on your papers. You've seen one of the movies. Your papers, are your papers due right now? I'm not sure. I can't remember. They're due this week. Either watching Persona or one of the other movies I assigned. That's what you're supposed to do. I did change the syllabus. So there's an extra essay in there, but I've lowered the points on the final paper and the quiz, so it all equals out to a relatively easy number I could do the math on. The when to stop. That's always good. Hope you guys are watching the movies. Hope they're coming in loud and clear on your however you watch films, on your computers, on your cell phones, on your TV. Anyway, lots of viewing platforms now. We're coming out of the 1950s. We're into the 60s now, and I've been talking about foreign films lately because foreign films are really turning on the old standard type of filmmaking, and Hollywood is kind of lost right now. They're losing out to television, which in the late 40s nobody had TV. When that's essentially when television started, about 1948 or so. But by 1955, 6, 7, 8, there was 10 million TVs, black and white, of course, and people were staying home in droves because it was free entertainment. All you had to do is have an antenna on the roof, and you could pick up your favorite I Love Lucy channel or Gunsmoke or Have Gun Wills Travel, and these were hugely popular shows. And Hollywood was losing its business because nobody was going to the movies. There was just too much free entertainment to be had. Now, it wasn't free, folks. There was commercials, but that was well worth it. In those days, the commercials weren't as intrusive or as many as we have now. On an hour-long show, there would be a commercial every 15 minutes, which is tolerable, right? So you got 15 solid minutes of commercial-free TV, and you get into your story, then commercials hit. That's when you go get the popcorn and the Coke and go to the bathroom and get back before the commercial's over. Because this was in the days before you could tape record anything on a VCR or DVD player, or there's no pausing it. You had to sit there through the whole thing, or right now in real time, or you're going to miss it. And you didn't want to do that because you love your episodes, and it was a family affair. Families were staying home and watching TV. They weren't going to the movies. So Hollywood is trying to figure out how to combat that. And they tried all sorts of different things, like Technicolor, Epic. They tried Cineramic Vision, VistaVision. These are big formatted cameras that they used that did not translate to television. You had to go to a movie theater to see it. And there was movie theaters popping up in major cities like LA, the Cinerama Dome, where the screen went around halfway around. And so you're really surrounded by the visual image. Some interesting movies came out of that, but they're kind of bloated, epic type of films. They had to be bigger than what was going on in the little box that everybody had at home, the TV. And so they kept saying bigger, better, bigger on the visuals. And so they had a lot of costume epics, a lot of biblical epics that came through in this time, like Ben-Hur, which is a really good movie, Ten Commandments, because those are big stories with a big background, and they could film them, and you could not see that kind of stuff on television. That was the important difference. But there's very few great films coming out of this era. I'm going to talk about one in particular, which is a masterpiece. But it was called Lawrence of Arabia. and I'm going to post. I'm going to post some scenes from it on YouTube. The story, it's based on T.E. Lawrence's exploits in the Middle East. They called it Arabia in those days. Now it's all broken up into Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. But before that, it was just simply one empire, the Ottoman Empire. And he went there as a representative. This is during World War One, so 1917, 16, 20 in that area. And under the British, they were trying to colonialize the Mideast for oil and whatnot. Other countries were there too, trying to do the same thing. Turkey and other countries. So they sent this guy, T.E. Lawrence, who was in the military, and they sent him over there to get a lay of the land. And he became enamored with the culture, and he rode with the revolutionary factions that were going against the government, and he kind of masterminded a lot of these the warfare, and he was known as a masterful technician when it came to warfare. But he got swept up in the entire feuding elements of the warring tribes that he can never bring them together that well. And so it's a wonderful book. You should read it. It's a big one, Seven Pillars of Wisdom, and true story. And they made this wonderful movie, and it stars Peter O'Toole. Now, it says his debut movie, but it wasn't. He had been in another movie, but it says introducing Peter O'Toole, and it's his defining role. He's a wonderful actor. He did many, many great movies later on, Lion and Winter, and other movies. But this movie defined him. Omar Sharif, the Egyptian actor, it defined him. American actor Anthony Quinn is in it, and British actor who went on to play Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's right, the Star Wars freaks. He played the King Faisal. Why can't I think of his name right now? Come on, Obi fans. Great British actor. Jeez, I'm forgetting his name right now. I'll come up with it in a minute. Anyway, I might have to look that up right now because it's upsetting me when I can't remember somebody's name. I should have written it down, but I didn't. Anyway, so that was one of the rare movies that actually got people out of their bedrooms into the movie theaters, and it is a masterpiece. Not just my opinion. Lots of people believe that. Bridge, hold on. Here, I just want to get this guy's name. It's really bugging me. Yeah, Alec Guinness, of course, Alec Guinness, who had starred in another big blockbuster David Lean movie called Bridge on the River Kwai in 1958, which is a wonderful World War II movie set in the jungles of, I believe, Burma, based on a true story also. Anyway, now this is before we had casting that was not so politically correct as it is now. So a British actor like Alec Guinness is the dark in his skin, and he puts on a fake accent. And now he's playing an Arabian king. Same with Anthony Quinn. They put on some dark makeup and a fake prosthetic nose, and he's with an accent. And now he's playing a warlord, an Arabian warlord. We don't do that anymore, folks. Those are great actors. They pull their roles off just fine. Anyway, so Obi-Wan Kenobi's in Lawrence of Arabia. long before he was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And so that film was such a revolutionary, epic storytelling. They filmed it out in the real desert, Sinai Desert. It would be literally 110, 120 degrees. It took many, many months. David Lean was he was a perfectionist, and he did take after take after take. Without that movie, Steve Spielberg wouldn't have a career. He admits it. That's one of his go-to movies. Those and the Kurosawa movies that we talked about, Seven Samurai. They reinvented how to do an epic film on a big scale. When I say epic, folks, that means it's done on a very large scale. There's hundreds of extras, maybe even thousands, battle sequences. The story's epic. It has a huge sweeping arc. We're not talking a little story here. We're talking a cultural shift in the storytelling. And where entire countries were developing at the time. And they tried to encompass that in the movie. And this movie does that wonderfully. I'll show you. I'm going to make you guys go to YouTube. I'll find some clips for you to look at. You should have watched the movie. It'll literally open up new vistas for you. The music, Maurice Jarre did a wonderful job. It's excellent on all levels. But there's some other epics that weren't so excellent. They weren't bad movies. They just didn't capture the public's attention, and they spent too much money on doing them. In these days, $1 million budgets were pretty high. Can you imagine that now? The average Hollywood film now, I think, is about 80 million. And these blockbuster ones that we see, whatever your favorite X-Men are, those are in the $200 million range. Let me just give you a rundown on that for 1 second. How much money do you have to make back before your movie goes into profit? They always say that Hollywood movies don't go into profit. That's a myth. That's a lie. They do that so they don't have to pay people what they owe them. That all stopped. In the old days, they would hire an actor like Jack Nicholson for Batman, and they offered him $20 million to do the Joker. He said, no, but I'll take profit points, but I want I want what they call net profits. Wasn't really done in those days because supposedly the system said that, well, there is no net profits. We never go into net profit. Well, they did. And supposedly Jack got upwards to $100 million. So that was the smartest move he ever made. He saw the writing on the wall that those films were going to take over and be huge with audiences. And he made a lot of money on it. You think 20 million's a lot? So do I. But he made 3 or 4 times that by taking what they call not gross. He took gross products. That's right, not net products. Profits. Gross. A movie goes out and grosses a certain amount of money. That's all the money they make on it. Now, net is when they have to pay the bills, the taxes, everybody's salaries, all the money they owe the investors. And so there's rarely ever anything left over after net, supposedly. But gross is you have to pay the person on the gross overall money it made. And it made a lot of money. So he got points on that, and it made him more filthy rich than he already was. So, but Lawrence of Arabia was a big budgeted movie. I think it was made for $10 million or something. That was huge in those days. The actors aren't getting the big fees they were as they are now. And it's all on the screen. It's in the photography. It's in the music. It's in the acting. You see the money up on the screen. This is long before computer-generated imagery, and so it's all real. The battles are real. They used hundreds of extras on horseback, on camels, firing machine guns, firing cannons. It's all real, folks. So there's a scene in it where they attack an entire city, and that city does not exist. They had to build the city so they could go blow it up. So that's how rigorous the filmmaking was. And David Lean had had great success with his other films. He usually directed these rather big, large, epic films like Bridge on the River, which was never a huge endeavor, hard shoot in a difficult jungle environment, the humidity, everybody was sick with malaria. And it paid off. It was a huge hit. And so when he did Lawrence of Arabia, he had opened the doors to his style of filmmaking. But that's not Hollywood, folks. It wasn't coming out of Hollywood. It was international filmmaking. Hollywood was struggling, so they came up with a film called Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor. At the time, 1961 or 3, I get maybe 63. They paid Elizabeth Taylor $1 million. She was the first actor to get a $1 million fee. And that's nothing now. They pay the character actors, they pay co-stars that on films now. But when she got it, it was an epic payday, and starred her future husband Richard Burton. She wasn't married to him at the time, and the great British actor Rex Harrison. No, I'm not named after him. Although it'd be okay. He's wonderful in this movie. He plays Caesar. Richard Burton plays Anthony, Mark Anthony, and Liz Taylor plays the Queen of Egypt. Cleopatra, who ends up killing herself with the poison snake, But it was a huge, huge mess and lost all its money at the box office. It lost so much money that it bankrupted 20th Century Fox, and they started selling off the property to realtors who wanted to build apartments and condos. That's how that movie crippled the film industry for many years. Hollywood didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to bounce back. How did they get the audience back from television? Well, young filmmakers, guys like George Lucas and Steve Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese and Brian De Palma were getting out of film school then, and they were looking at the foreign films I've talked to you about, the French foreign films I told you about, the French New Wave, the 400 Blows, Breathless, and the rest. They were looking at the Italian neorealism we talked about in this class, Open City, Rome Open City, and the Bicycle Thieves, and then they were looking at other foreign films, even British foreign films that were coming up with the Angry Young Man series, Look Back in Anger, Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, Room at the Top. These are modestly told stories in a naturalistic way. They weren't these big bloated epic with $1 million stars in the movies to distract us from looking at the actual story. And so there was a new breed of filmmaker who were influenced by these other films, not by the epics that Hollywood was producing. And they were just starting to begin to step into the system. And they're starting to get their first films, their first films they could direct. Not happening yet, but it's coming. It's in the future. But before that happens, we still have these other films. Excuse me. They turned to biblical stories, and they're literally epic, big biblical stories. You had big stories on a large canvas. A lot of them starred Charlton Heston. He played Moses in the Ten Commandments, and he was Ben-Hur and Ben-Hur, which really is a wonderful film, hugely influential epic about a slave who works his way up to being a master chariot racer. They didn't have stock car races, but they had chariot racers, and the chariot scenes were wonderful and broad and epic and real and dangerous as hell. And that was another. So they were using these big epics. Hollywood was filming this stuff. Why they were trying to figure out how to combat television and how to get people back in the theater. These films, these were successful. It wasn't enough. They started making other films like Cleopatra, like Hello Dolly, which was a big bloated musical with Barbara Streisand, big hit on Broadway, but kind of a dead movie to watch with nice songs. Not taking anything wrong with that. These are entertaining movies, folks, but they weren't getting a new audience. They're getting the old audience who didn't want to go out of the house anymore. And so they come up with movies like Dr. Dolittle, which was a cute kind of children's movie about a doctor who could talk to the animals. They remade it with Eddie Murphy. Maybe you saw it. The first one was made with Rex Harrison and had a couple catchy songs, but it was another bloated misfire. And the young kids, the college age kids who were looking at the French foreign films and the Kurosawa films and Bergman films from Sweden and Fellini's films, they were looking at those and going, that's what we're into. Why can't America make those types of films? We'll go see them. Then a visionary producer started seeing something no one else was seeing, and his name was Roger Corman. During this time, there might have been upwards to 5,000-6,000 drive-in movie theaters across the country, and that's where kids went, because you drove your mom's car down there, and maybe you were making out in the front seat with your girlfriend if you're lucky. And he decided to make films for that audience, the drive-in movie audience, the young people. And he came up with this concept to make these films that would attract young people. Well, what attracts young people? Kind of the same thing that attracts them now, horror films. And so he bought a bunch of rights to Edgar Allan Poe stories, and they started cranking out these low budget horror films with some people acting in it, old horror stars like Vincent Price and Boris Karloff, who were long past their heyday, but people recognized them because they'd been in horror films in the 30s, like Frankenstein and Dracula and House of Wax. And then they would use young stars, up-and-comers like Jack Nicholson. That's how he got his start in acting in these. So these films, he can make them for very little money on the production values are pretty amateuristic, and he could film a movie in 5 days, an entire film in 5 days. And Roger Corman was a marketing genius that way. And he directed a bunch of these films. He wasn't the greatest director, but he gave other filmmakers the chance to direct movies. And he gave Francis Ford Coppola a chance to direct a film called Dementia 13. He gave Martin Scorsese a shot at directing not his first movie, but it wasn't a student film like his other ones were, called Boxcar Bertha, exploitation film, absolutely kind of based on the Bonnie and Clyde sort of 1930s criminals running from the law. He started giving them the camera an opportunity. He also came up with the concept. He saw how popular the Hells Angels were becoming in the nation in biker films. And so he did a series of biker films. He did a movie called Wild Angels with Peter Fonda, Nancy Sinatra, and Bruce Dern. And they did it for very little money. And it was all about these outlaw motorcycle people just kind of being outside the society, having a good time at parties, having lots of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, folks. And that really appealed to the youth of America. They saw something that they related to. Finally, there's something on the screen. It's hard to relate to Dr. Dolittle. It's hard to relate to Hello Dolly, but it's pretty easy to relate to a guy on a bike with a chick on the back who's wearing a bikini. That's easily relatable. Let's put some rock and roll music on there. And that studio, and lots of filmmakers came through his studio. I don't want to go any further than that because we're going to watch a documentary probably next week about this whole scene. Not yet, though. And then everything changed with about 3 different movies that came out. That change hasn't happened yet, but I'm going to talk about the change next week with really 3 revolutionary films that changed everything. These young directors finally got their shot at it. And it started with Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, and Easy Rider, the epic biker film. But I'm not going to be talking about such stuff till next week. Anyway, on that note, get your papers in, do a good job. You know what I'm looking for. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. I'm going to post a couple of little documentaries you should watch about maybe Roger Corman, maybe Lawrence of Arabia, and others of this early 60s American films, how Hollywood had lost its way. And it was the younger generation. Yes, folks, I hate to say it, the hippie generation is coming to Hollywood. And on that note, remember, everything is cinema.